Number 7. The Talis plane wrecks. If you're a history buff or an aviation enthusiast, you might want to visit the Talis plane wrecks in Papua New Guinea. These are 2 American aircraft that crashed during World War II and are now preserved in the jungle surrounded by palm trees. The first plane is a B-52H bomber, which was on a mission to destroy Japanese supply ships in September 1944. The bomber successfully attacked the enemy targets but suffered engine problems and had to make an emergency landing at Talis airstrip. The plane skidded off the runway and came to a halt, but the crew escaped unharmed. The second plane is a Lockheed Ventura, which was on a mission to bomb an airstrip near Rabaul, a Japanese stronghold. The Ventura dropped its bombs and hit the target, but was hit by anti-aircraft fire and lost control. The pilot managed to steer the plane towards Talis airstrip, but it crashed before reaching it. The crew survived the crash but were captured by the Japanese and taken as prisoners of war. The Talis plane wrecks are remarkable relics of World War II history, and they offer a glimpse into the bravery and sacrifice of the Allied air crews. They also show the harsh conditions and challenges of flying in the South Pacific during the war. The plane wrecks are accessible by 4-wheel drive from Walindi Plantation Resort, which is a popular scuba diving destination in Kimby Bay. You can explore the plane wrecks on foot and admire their details, such as the bullet holes in their fuselages, the propellers, and the cockpit instruments. You can also learn more about their stories from the local guides, who will tell you about the history and culture of Papua New Guinea. The Talis plane wrecks are a must-see for anyone who loves history, adventure, and nature. They're a testament to the courage and the resilience of the human spirit, and they remind us of the importance of peace and harmony in our world. Number 6. Cluster bombs in South Lebanon. Cluster bombs are weapons that release hundreds of small explosives called submunitions over a wide area. They're designed to destroy military targets such as vehicles, buildings, or personnel. However, cluster bombs often fail to explode on impact, leaving behind unexploded submunitions that pose a serious threat to civilians. In the summer of 2006, Israel and Hezbollah fought a 34-day war in Lebanon, during which Israel dropped an estimated 4 million submunitions in the south of the country. According to the UN Mine Action Coordinate Center, or UNMACC, about 40% of these submunitions failed to detonate upon impact, creating a deadly legacy for the people of South Lebanon. Since the end of the war, more than 200 people have been killed or injured by cluster bombs in South Lebanon. Most of the victims are farmers, herders, or children who encounter the submunitions while working or playing in their fields or villages. The cluster bombs also prevent the use of land for agriculture, which is the main source of income for many people in South Lebanon. The clearance of cluster bombs in South Lebanon is a slow and dangerous process. It requires specialized equipment and trained personnel who can locate and destroy the submunitions safely. The UNMACC and its partners have cleared more than 516 million square feet of land since 2006. But large areas still remain contaminated. The clearance effort could be accelerated if Israel provided the coordinates of its cluster bomb strikes as requested by the UN. The use of cluster bombs in South Lebanon has been widely condemned by human rights groups and international organizations as a violation of international humanitarian law. Cluster bombs are indiscriminate and disproportionate weapons that can cause excessive harm to civilians and civilian objects. They also create long-term humanitarian and environmental problems that hinder post-conflict recovery and development. The hidden danger of cluster bombs in South Lebanon is a reminder of the need for a global ban on these weapons. More than 100 countries have signed and ratified the Convention on Cluster Munitions, which prohibits the use, production, stockpiling, and transfer of cluster bombs. However, some major producers and users of cluster bombs like Israel, the United States, Russia, and China haven't joined the treaty. The international community should pressure these countries to adhere to the convention and provide assistance to the affected countries and communities. Number 5. Camp Hero. Camp Hero, also known as Montauk Air Force Station, was once a secret military base located in Montauk, New York. Dubbed by conspiracy theorists as the home of various otherworldly experiments, Camp Hero's mysterious history has made it a fascinating topic of interest for many. Originally built during World War II as a coastal defense station, Camp Hero became an important radar installation in the 1950s, playing a crucial role in the Cold War. It was strategically positioned to detect any potential Soviet airstrike, with its radar scanning the Atlantic Ocean for any signs of approaching enemy aircraft. However, in the 1980s, Camp Hero gained notoriety for its alleged involvement in secretive experiments. Stories began to circulate of mind control experiments, time travel, and even interactions with extraterrestrial beings. These conspiracy theories were further fueled by the book and subsequent movie, The Montauk Project, which portrayed Camp Hero as a hub for covert government operations. And one of the most infamous tales from the military base involves the so-called Montauk Monster, a creature that supposedly escaped from the base. According to reports, it was a horrifying amalgamation of animal and human DNA, resulting from an experiment gone wrong. Though the creature's existence has been dismissed by skeptics, it continues to captivate the imaginations of those intrigued by the unexplainable. Today, Camp Hero is no longer active, and the site is open to the public as a state park. Visitors can explore the decommissioned military structures, hike the scenic trails, and enjoy breathtaking views of the Atlantic Ocean. While the supernatural stories surrounding Camp Hero may be nothing more than urban legends, its rich history and picturesque location make it an intriguing destination for history enthusiasts and nature lovers alike. And today, Camp Hero remains an enigmatic place surrounded by rumors and conspiracy theories. Regardless of the truth behind these stories, the allure of this former military base lies in its historical significance and the natural beauty of its surroundings. Exploring Camp Hero allows visitors to immerse themselves in the history of the Cold War era while enjoying the stunning vistas of Montauk's coastline. Though the truth may remain elusive, the fascination with Camp Hero continues to captivate individuals seeking an adventure through both history and mystery. Do you know of any other secret military bases you'd like us to cover in a future video? Tell us about it in the comments below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Now, on to number 4. Bombs in the UK. You might think that the UK is a safe place to live. But did you know that there are thousands of unexploded bombs buried underground or underwater from World War II? These bombs, also known as unexploded ordnance or UXO, are a legacy of the German bombing campaign that targeted major cities and strategic locations across the country. According to the Ministry of Defense, about 10% of the bombs dropped by the Luftwaffe didn't explode on impact and remain potential threats to this day. Unexploded bombs can be very dangerous, especially if they're disturbed by construction work or erosion. They can literally explode at any time, causing damage, injury, or death to anyone nearby. They can also release harmful chemicals into the soil and water, posing a risk to the environment and public health. In fact, unexploded bombs are so common that they've become a part of everyday life for some people in the UK. For example, in 2023, an unexploded bomb was found near London City Airport, forcing it to close and disrupting thousands of flights. And in 2021, an Air Force Civil Engineering Squadron uncovered the largest ever haul of unexploded World War II ordnance on record for a U.S. engineer regiment. So how do you deal with unexploded bombs? It's not an easy task in the slightest. First, you need to find them, which can be difficult since they're often buried deep underground or underwater. Then you need to make them safe, which can be dangerous since they can be very sensitive to movement or vibration. Sometimes they can be transported to a safe location and destroyed by a controlled explosion. But other times they have to be detonated in place, which can require evacuating nearby residents and businesses. There are also some specialist companies and individuals who can help with the recovery and disposal of unexploded bombs. These bombs are a reminder of the horrors of war and the resilience of people who lived through them. they're also a challenge for the present and future generations who have to deal with them. The next time you walk on the streets of London or visit a historical site in the countryside, remember that there might be a hidden danger lurking just beneath your feet. Number 3. The mysterious tank cemetery of Soal. If you're looking for an unusual and intriguing place to visit in Germany, you might want to check out the tank cemetery of Soal. This is a field where 24 old tanks are lined up in neat rows, seemingly abandoned and forgotten. But what's the story behind these rusty war machines? The tank cemetery is located near Soal, a small town in the Lower Saxony region. The tanks are part of the Meppen military shooting range, which is one of the oldest and largest in all of Europe. The shooting range was established in 1877 by the Krupp family, a famous German family known for manufacturing arms. It was then used extensively during both World Wars and the Cold War, testing various weapons and ammunition. The tanks are mostly Leopard 1 and M47 Patton models, which were used by the German and NATO forces from the 1950s to the 1990s. They're not actually abandoned, but rather used as targets for helicopter pilots and other military exercises. However, they're not always in use, and sometimes they're left alone in the field, creating a surreal and eerie sight. The tank cemetery isn't a tourist attraction, but rather a hidden gem that only few people know about. There are no signs or fences around the field, so anyone can walk up to the tanks and explore them. But visitors should be careful and respectful, as the area is still an active military zone and may be closed or dangerous at certain times. The tank cemetery of Soal is a fascinating place that offers a glimpse into the history and technology of warfare. It's also a reminder of the destructive power and human cost of war. If you ever find yourself near Soal, you might want to take a detour and see these tanks for yourself. Number 2. Lake Michigan FM2 Wildcat. Have you ever wondered what lies beneath the waters of Lake Michigan? You might be surprised to learn that there are hundreds of sunken airplanes from World War II resting on the lake bed. These planes were lost during training missions on 2 makeshift aircraft carriers, the USS Wolverine and the USS Sable, that operated on the lake from 1942 to 1945. One of these planes is a rare FM2 Wildcat fighter that was recovered in 2012 after spending almost 70 years underwater. The FM2 Wildcat was a naval fighter plane that was used by the US and its allies during World War II. It was a rugged and reliable aircraft that could take off and land on short decks and fight against superior enemy fighters. The FM2 was an improved version of the earlier F4F Wildcat, with a more powerful engine, a lighter airframe, and a larger tail. The FM2 Wildcat played a vital role in the Pacific Theater, where it helped secure air superiority over the Japanese. The Lake Michigan Wildcat was flown by Ensign William Forbes, who was practicing carrier landings on the USS Sable on December 28, 1944. Unfortunately, though, his engine failed on takeoff, and he had to ditch the plane in the lake. He escaped safely, but his plane sank to a depth of 210 feet. And there it remained until it was discovered and salvaged by A&T Recovery, a company that specializes in retrieving historic aircraft from Lake Michigan. The recovery of the Lake Michigan Wildcat was a remarkable feat, as it involved diving in cold, dark water, attaching cables to the fragile frame, and lifting it carefully to the surface. The plane was remarkably well preserved thanks to the low temperatures, fresh water, and corrosion-resistant coating of the Wildcat. It still had its original paint, markings, and even bullet holes from previous combat missions. The Lake Michigan Wildcat is now part of the Rod Lewis Air Legends collection in Texas, where it's been restored to flying condition. It's now the only FM2 Wildcat in the world and a rare piece of aviation history. It's also a tribute to the brave pilots who trained and fought in these planes during World War II. And at number 1, the submarine madness of Finland. Finland is a country that's known for its beautiful lakes, forests, and saunas. but it also has a hidden underwater history that involves dozens of Soviet submarines from World War II. These submarines were sunk or scuttled in the Baltic Sea, either by the Finnish Navy or by their own crews. Some of them were captured and used by the Finns against their former owners, and others were deliberately destroyed to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. Many of them still contain torpedoes, mines, and other explosives to this day, making them dangerous to explore. The submarine madness in Finland began in 1939, when the Soviet Union invaded Finland in the Winter War. The Soviets had a large fleet of submarines that they used to attack the Finnish and German ships in the Baltic Sea. However, the Finns had a secret weapon, a network of underwater listening devices that could detect and track the Soviet submarines. The Finns also had a few small submarines of their own, as well as torpedo boats and mines. The Finns managed to sink or damage several Soviet submarines during the Winter War, using various tactics such as depth charges, torpedoes, and ramming. The submarine madness then continued in 1941, when Finland joined Nazi Germany in the invasion of the Soviet Union. This started the Continuation War, which lasted until 1944. During this war, the Finns captured several Soviet submarines and used them against their former owners. The Continuation War ended in September of 1944, but the submarine madness didn't stop there. As part of the peace treaty with the Soviet Union, Finland had to hand over all of its submarines to the Soviets. However, some of the Soviet submarines that were still in Finnish waters were scuttled by their crews to avoid surrendering them to their enemies. The submarine madness of Finland left behind a legacy of sunken wrecks that are still lying at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Some of them have been explored by divers and researchers who have found valuable historical and technical information about these vessels. Others have been left untouched, as they're considered too dangerous or sensitive to disturb.
8. Legend versus fact. You've likely heard that the Bermuda Triangle is a region of the Atlantic Ocean where ships and planes mysteriously vanish, never to be seen again. But there's even been claims of extraterrestrial kidnappings, travel between dimensions, and ships being taken down by giant squid and the mythical Kraken. Despite the long-standing folklore, the Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, isn't recognized by any official government or scientific body. Most mainstream scholars claim that there's no scientific evidence to back up the supernatural claims surrounding the region. You may be even more surprised to learn that many incidents that occur within the Bermuda Triangle can be explained by scientific evidence, human error, and other conventional causes. So now, join me as I explore the myths and facts surrounding this mysterious region by discussing some of the most famous, or perhaps infamous, shipwrecks, plane crashes, and disappearances that have occurred within the Devil's Triangle. 7. Konamara 4. In 1955, a pleasure yacht called the Konamara 4 was spotted 400 miles south of Bermuda, adrift with no crew or passengers anywhere in sight. It was cited by the media as an example of yet another one of the Bermuda Triangle's unexplained supernatural occurrences. During the early 1970s, the Konamara was a main feature of author Charles Berlitz's book The Bermuda Triangle, which sold more than 30 million copies. In fact, the boat was instrumental in perpetuating the myth of the Devil's Triangle. Other writers capitalized on the Konamara's popularity as a Bermuda Triangle fixture, with some even claiming that she survived 3 hurricanes despite the unexplained disappearance of her crew. But these ghost ship stories are patently false according to the History Collection. In reality, the true version of what happened is far less exciting than the myth. The Konamara was ripped from her moorings in Bermuda during a hurricane and drifted out to sea. She was found with no crew aboard because nobody was on the boat when she was pulled away by the storm and currents. This story is a good example of how the media has helped to keep the myths surrounding the Bermuda Triangle alive, even in the face of perfectly logical explanations. Legends endure, even when one doesn't have to look too hard to find the truth about what happened. Of course, these stories wouldn't be so popular if people didn't buy into them so eagerly, so it's not entirely the media's fault. The blame also falls on society itself for not being diligent about our fact-checking, something we still struggle with to this day. 6. Flight 19. On the evening of December 5, 1945, a group of torpedo bombers left Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for a U.S. Navy training flight. Collectively known as Flight 19, the squadron was led by Navy pilot and World War II veteran Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor. They followed a triangular flight plan, which involved passing over a shallow coral reef called Hens and Chicken Shoals, then heading north over Grand Bahama Island and back to base. Things initially went as planned, but took a turn for the worse after the team turned left for the second leg of their trip over Grand Bahama. For some reason, Lieutenant Taylor became convinced that his navigation equipment was malfunctioning and that the squadron was flying in the wrong direction. The pilots then became even more disoriented as they encountered heavy wind gusts and rain. Taylor said over the radio that he believed the team was somewhere over the Florida Keys, which would have placed them hundreds of miles off course. Some modern experts believe he confused the Bahamas for the Keys and mistakenly thought they were flying over the Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, though, Taylor made the fateful decision to fly northeast, taking the men further out over the Caribbean Sea. Taylor's pilots knew that something wasn't right, and at one point they convinced Taylor to turn west, but he once again changed course and ordered the men to fly eastward. The squadron's radio transmissions grew weak as the planes ran low on fuel, and Taylor told the team to prepare to ditch. The Navy launched a search for the confused crew, but never found the downed aircraft or their crew members. It's possible that the planes are sitting at the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle, but until or unless someone finds them, their fate will remain uncertain. After initially concluding that Taylor had gotten geographically confused, the Navy changed its report on the incident to instead state that the cause of the squadron's disappearance was unknown. 5. USS Cyclops. Built for the United States Navy in the years leading up to World War I, the USS Cyclops originally operated as a bulk coal carrier called a collier. At nearly 550 feet long, it was the Navy's largest and fastest fuel ship at the time. During the war, the Cyclops transported medical staff and supplies to a French hospital, then returned to North America and served along the east coast of the US for the next few years. Then in 1918, the ship began ferrying cargo back and forth between the US and Brazil. On February 16, 1918, the ship left Rio de Janeiro for Baltimore with a load of manganese ore. During the voyage, the captain requested a detour to Barbados due to engine problems, which he suspected might be caused by an overload of cargo. The request was granted, and the Cyclops was never seen or heard from again after departing from the island. No distress signal was sent, and all 309 souls on board vanished along with the ship, in what remains the greatest non-combat loss of lives in American naval history. A massive search effort ensued, but it failed to turn up any sign of the missing vessel, including an oil slick or debris. There are various theories about what may have happened to the Cyclops, blaming everything from German spies to the Bermuda Triangle, aliens from outer space, and the captain, who was allegedly a drunk and in no position to command a ship. It's also possible that the crew was unfamiliar with how to properly operate the ship with its heavy load of manganese ore, a material used in steel production that the vessel didn't normally transport. What do you think we'd find if we traveled to the very bottom of the Bermuda Triangle? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's move on to number 4. 4. The Witchcraft. The Witchcraft was a 23-foot luxury yacht owned by a hotel entrepreneur named Dan Burak. On December 22, 1967, Burak and his friend, Father Patrick Horgan, sailed out of Miami with plans to view the holiday lights along the shoreline. But when they were just a mile off the coast, the boat hit something in the water and Burak requested assistance from the Coast Guard. He sounded calm, though, so it didn't seem like an emergency. And even if it was, the Witchcraft was equipped with an emergency flotation device that supposedly rendered it unsinkable. Although the yacht was damaged and needed to be towed, the hull seemed intact, so there was no outward reason to panic. Burak told the Coast Guard he'd light a flare. Then, 19 minutes later, the Coast Guard arrived at the location the flare was fired from, but the Witchcraft was nowhere to be seen, and along with it, Burak and Horgan had vanished into thin air. There was no debris in the water or any other signs that something bad had happened, other than the fact that the boat had gone missing completely. A search and rescue effort ensued over the following days, covering 1,200 square miles without a single sign of the Witchcraft. It was truly puzzling, especially since the yacht had a highly reliable emergency flotation device and should have kept it above water. And it was unlikely that the device failed, since the technology it was made with was known to be so resilient that the Coast Guard would often be forced to destroy partially sunk vessels that wouldn't go down on their own. The Coast Guard's final statement on the matter was that Burak and Horgan are presumed missing but not lost at sea. 3. BSA Star Tiger. One morning in January 1948, 31 passengers and crew members were forced to wait at the airport in Lisbon, Portugal for 2.5 hours when their plane, the Star Tiger, ran into some engine trouble. Then, after they finally got going on their flight to Bermuda, they were further delayed during a refueling stop in the Azores Islands. The weather was still bleak the next morning, but the captain, Brian W. McMillan, decided to take off for Bermuda anyway. But to avoid getting caught in the worst of the storm, he flew no higher than 2,000 feet. He also received weather updates from another pilot who'd flown out an hour ahead. The Star Tiger was lashed by heavy winds and rain, but the flight seemed to go as planned for the first 10 hours. But by the time McMillan realized that the wind had blown the plane about 60 miles off course, it was past the point of no alternative. In other words, there was no airport close enough to divert to if something went wrong. McMillan followed the navigator's instructions, which sent the Star Tiger directly into a strong wind gust, but should have enabled it to land at its destination with at least an hour's worth of fuel remaining. Captain Frank Griffin, the pilot of the plane that flew out ahead of the Star Tiger, landed in Bermuda without encountering any major turbulence, icing, electrical storms, or other weather-related problems. But McMillan went radio silent, and the Star Tiger was never seen or heard from again. An intensive 5-day search amid worsening weather failed to turn up any sign of the aircraft. And while it's pretty obvious that the plane crashed, its whereabouts and the reason for the accident remain a mystery to this day. Even if one of the aircraft's engines had failed, it should have been able to reach Bermuda. An investigation concluded that a mechanical failure was unlikely to be the cause of the disaster. It's possible that flying into the gale caused the plane to consume more fuel than expected, even after factoring in the weather, causing it to run out of fuel and plunge into the Atlantic. Investigators have also suggested that the crew may have forgotten they were flying at a low altitude and may have miscalculated their descent, especially if they were already fatigued. This could have also easily caused the plane to crash. Around the time the Star Tiger should have been approaching Bermuda, the captain of a merchant ship reported seeing a low-flying plane with blinking lights halfway between Bermuda and Delaware Bay. This raises the troubling possibility that the plane was much further off course than its crew realized. And of course, there are theories about the aircraft falling victim to the alleged supernatural powers of the Bermuda Triangle. But the only certainty about the missing flight is that nobody knows what happened to it or where it ended up, leaving the Star Tiger's fate shrouded in mystery to this day. 2. SS Kotapaci. The 253-foot-long SS Kotapaci bulk carrier was built in a hurry after World War I as part of a US-funded emergency shipbuilding program. She vanished during a brutal tropical storm in 1925 after departing South Carolina for Havana, leading many to believe that she had most likely come to rest on the sea floor somewhere within the infamous Bermuda Triangle. The crew had tried to radio for help, but all 32 men aboard went down with the ship. The Kotapaci was then rediscovered 40 miles off the Jacksonville, Florida coast during the 1980s, but experts only confirmed her identity in 2020 after spending years analyzing records. As it turned out, the wreck wasn't in the Bermuda Triangle after all, as so many had believed. It was found that the crew members' heartbroken families had sued over their disappearances. They convinced the Kotapaci's carpenter to testify in the case, claiming that broken hatch covers that were used to cover coal could have caused the vessel to leak and sink during the storm. It also came to light that the crew's distress calls had been picked up in Jacksonville, not far from where the ship was found. If nothing else, the discovery helps to eliminate any far-flung theories about the Kotapaci being sucked into the bottomless vortex of the Bermuda Triangle. 1. SS Marine Sulfur Queen. Originally named the SS Esso New Haven, the ship that would eventually be called the SS Marine Sulfur Queen was built in Pennsylvania in 1944. The ship started its career as a T-2 tanker that carried fuel, but it became the Sulfur Queen in 1960 when it was converted to carry molten sulfur. On February 2, 1963, the 504-foot-long ship departed from Beaumont, Texas, with over 15,000 tons of sulfur and 39 crew members aboard. Then, 2 days later, a crewman sent a radio message communicating the vessel's coordinates in the waters south of Florida. At the time, they were caught in a rough storm with nearly 16-foot waves and strong winds of up to 53 miles per hour. Nobody ever saw or heard from the Sulfur Queen again, and its fate is a mystery to this day. The ship was reported missing 2 days after its last radio transmission, but no sign of it was ever found, so the search was called off. Its disappearance is steeped in superstition regarding the infamous Bermuda Triangle, but a Coast Guard report found a handful of more rational reasons that could explain the Sulfur Queen's disappearance. The ship was barely seaworthy if at all, and its sulfur tanks were prone to constant fires, which had a tendency to short out the electrical equipment. And as a T-2 tanker, it was susceptible to splitting at the keel, especially with age. Crew members had also previously mentioned that the Sulfur Queen was heavily corroded. One sailor even described the vessel as a floating garbage can. Given its condition, there's a distinct possibility that the ship met its fate and plunged to the sea floor. And while it's frustrating to not know exactly what happened, the likelihood of another explanation is slim.
7. UFOs over the ocean. In 2021, Pentagon footage of an unidentified flying object off the coast of San Diego was leaked to the public. Captured in 2019 aboard the Navy combat ship USS Omaha, the video shows a disc-shaped object hovering over the ocean and then plunging into it. Documentary filmmaker Jeremy Corbell posted the clip on Twitter, noting in a caption that no wreckage was ever recovered. And the Pentagon even confirmed that the footage was authentic. This is just one of many examples of footage captured by military personnel that appears to show strange objects in the sky. The years 2014 and 2015 were especially active for Navy pilots of the American East Coast, who reported seeing disc-shaped objects that appeared capable of traveling at hypersonic speeds and reaching altitudes of up to 30,000 feet. In an official report documenting 120 sightings over 2 decades, U.S. intelligence officials clarified that none of the incidents originated from the American military or government, including top-secret programs to develop new technology. Additionally, the findings conceded that experts don't have an explanation for many of the sightings. and the possibility of the objects being weather balloons, which has happened in the past, was largely ruled out. Simply put, while the reports didn't definitively conclude that any of the strange sightings involved extraterrestrial vehicles, the possibility also hasn't been disproven. Either way, the government's newfound openness about the issue is a good sign. Throughout 2023, the Pentagon has declassified a plethora of UFO-related videos and documents, making it easier than ever for people to come to their own conclusions. And the national dialogue about UFO sightings remains ongoing. 6. The disappearance of Etto Mayorana. Born in Catania, Sicily in 1906, Etto Mayorana was a highly gifted theoretical physicist. He studied under the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Enrico Fermi, who ranked Majorana among historic geniuses like Galileo and Isaac Newton. During the late 1930s, Majorana left his salary largely untouched. His checks were deposited into a bank account where the money accumulated until he abruptly withdrew it all on March 23, 1938. He then took a boat from Naples to Palermo for reasons that remain unclear to this day. Shortly before departing from Palermo 2 days later, Majorana sent an ominous telegraph to Antonio Carelli, one of his supervisors at the University of Naples where he lectured students. It contained an apology for Majorana's sudden disappearance and described his decision to vanish as unavoidable. Majorana quickly followed the cryptic note up with another telegram telling Carelli to disregard his previous message. Then, later that evening, he boarded a boat back to Naples. But he was never seen or heard from again, even after a police search was undertaken. And to this day, his fate remains a mystery. Several theories suggest that Majorana was running from something. Some believe that he predicted the development of nuclear weapons and wanted nothing to do with it, so he bailed. He could have been met with foul play, or maybe he took his own life. Or perhaps he started a new life as a new person. There's even been speculation that he believed he would have been forced to help with the development of a nuclear bomb, and that he fled to avoid participating in a not-yet-thought-of project that he was ethically opposed to. A cryptic note Majorana left behind for his family urged them not to grieve for more than 3 days, suggesting that he planned on dying. But nobody is certain what his confusing communications meant during those last few days he was seen alive. And the truth is that the mystery of his fate may forever remain unsolved. 5. The Frerieden. In December 1988, an 82-foot freighter called the Frerieden departed from Miami for Haiti with 7 Haitian crew members. Also on board was the German captain, Florian Meyer-Borsch, who also went by the name David Florian, and a 23-year-old journalism student named Lisa Bishop. When Lisa Bishop and several crew members failed to call their families on Christmas, their loved ones grew concerned about their well-being and contacted authorities. Lisa's boyfriend and loved ones had strongly urged her to pass on the trip, but it became clear in the weeks leading up to her departure that there was no talking her out of it. So, left with no other choice, they accepted her decision. A Coast Guard search failed to turn up any sign of the boat or its occupants, and they remain missing to this day, with the exception of one reported sighting that was never officially confirmed. Determined to find out what had happened to their daughter, the Bishops launched a campaign in pursuit of information that would help put the mystery of the Frieden's fate to rest. A woman in the Cayman Islands, who was storing David Florian's belongings, claimed that he was involved in large-scale human smuggling activities. She said that he'd gotten in over his head with the operation and that Lisa didn't know about it when she agreed to travel on board the ship. In 2017, a Redditor posted an update claiming that they spoke with Lisa's boyfriend. The post stated that Florian's parents and acquaintances hadn't seen or heard from him since the Frieden's disappearance, suggesting that the claims about him being alive were mere rumors. And while multiple people hinted toward his involvement in smuggling, no solid evidence was ever found to suggest that it might be true, even if it hasn't been totally disproven. To this day, everyone who is traveling aboard the Frerieden remains unaccounted for, and while its fate remains a mystery, it can be reasonably assumed that something tragic happened at sea and caused the boat to sink. Do you personally know anyone who's disappeared on the high seas only to be found later? Let us know in the comments below. But first, subscribe. 4. The Sarah Joe. During the 1970s, a man from Maui named Robert Malayakini acquired a 17-foot motorboat and named it the Sarah Joe after his parents. One day in 1979, 5 seasoned fishermen set out from the easternmost part of the island's coast for a day of pleasure fishing. The crew included Robert's 27-year-old twin brother, Ralph Malayakini, 27-year-old Scott Moorman, 38-year-old Benjamin Kalama, 26-year-old Patrick Wosner, and 31-year-old Peter Hanchett. They departed in clear conditions at around 10 o'clock a.m. But just a few hours later, the winds changed and a storm blew in. As the weather worsened, Peter Hanchett's father went out looking for Sarah Joe. He couldn't find it though, so the Coast Guard joined the effort. After 5 days passed with no sign of the boat or its crew, the search was called off. Locals continued to look for the men for several weeks, but they eventually gave up hope. Then, in 1988, nearly 10 years after the Sarah Joe and her crew vanished, a biologist named John Naughton found the boat on a deserted atoll called Taongi in the Marshall Islands. Naughton had participated in the first search a decade earlier, and he just happened to be on a wildlife expedition 2,000 miles away when he spotted the weathered vessel. Nearby, Naughton and his colleagues discovered a jawbone protruding from a shallow grave marked by a pile of stones and a cross made of driftwood. Authorities identified the bones as Scott Moorman, and buried with him was a pad of paper with small, square pieces of tinfoil-like material between each set of pages. None of the other 4 men were ever found, and the purpose of the tinfoil-lined paper remains unclear to this day. It's also unclear whether Moorman was alive when he reached Taongi, or if he was found dead on the boat after it washed ashore. Shortly after Sarah Joe's discovery, Robert Malayakini traveled to Taongi to investigate. He concluded that the journey was too far to survive in a motorboat, but not knowing exactly what happened has left the missing men's families and community without much-needed closure. The Coast Guard returned the boat to Robert, and it's been sitting at the end of his driveway ever since, serving as a constant reminder of the missing 4 crew members. 3. The Hurst Massacre. Located on the Prince of Wales Island at the edge of the Bering Sea, the sleepy fishing village of Craig, Alaska was home to just 600 people in 1983. Not a lot happened there outside the fishing industry, and its history was rather unremarkable. However, Craig was thrust onto the map in September of that year, when an unknown assailant boarded a 58-foot boat called the Investor and massacred its crew under the cover of darkness. The victims included the Investor's owner, 28-year-old Mark Colthurst, his pregnant wife Irene, their 2 children, and 4 deckhands. Several hours later, at around 6 o'clock a.m., the Investor was seen powering up and leaving the harbor. The man driving the boat waved at the skipper of a nearby vessel as the Investor retreated to a secluded bay, about a mile or so away. Nobody knew that the biggest mass murder in Alaska's history had occurred that morning, and nobody noticed that someone other than Colthurst was at the helm of the ship. The next morning, the Investor had returned to the harbor, where it was found engulfed in flames. In 1984, authorities charged John Kenneth Peel, a crewman from another boat, with 8 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. Peel maintained his innocence despite witness reports of him being seen near the Investor around the time of the killings. His first trial ended in a hung jury, and he was acquitted at his second trial. Since then, officials have stated that the case is closed, even though nobody was ever held accountable for the deaths. While the victims' relatives felt as though Peel got away with murder, others remain open-minded to the possibility that someone else was responsible for the massacre. 2. The SS Naronic. Built in 1892 in Belfast, Ireland, the 470-foot SS Naronic was a White Star Line cargo steamship that mainly operated as a livestock carrier. She vanished, though, in the Atlantic during her 7th voyage in February 1893. At the time, ships had no way to call for help if they ran into trouble on the open sea. The only way to get help was for another ship to pass by. But the ocean is a big place, so it didn't happen often. This wasn't the case for the Naronic, however, and nobody even began to worry about the ship until her arrival in New York was long overdue. Delays were normal back then, but this was different. The wreck was never found, and the 74 people who were aboard when it sank were presumed dead. Shortly after the Naronic disappeared, 2 of her lifeboats, both empty and disabled, were spotted 500 miles off Halifax, Nova Scotia. An inquiry failed to determine a likely cause for the sinking, even after inspecting her sister ship, the Bovik, which proved that the ship's design was stable. Shortly after the Naronic vanished, 4 bottled messages claiming to be from crew members washed ashore in various places along the U.S. East Coast and in the United Kingdom. And the letters contained claims that the ship had struck an iceberg. Officials dismissed the notes as hoaxes, but they also never disproved the possibility of them being real. To this day, people remain divided on the matter, and unfortunately, the mystery of the Naronic's fate may never be solved. 1. The disappearance of Richard Carr. In 2017, retired psychologist Richard Carr set out on his lifelong dream to sail around the world. The 71-year-old departed for the solo voyage from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, aboard his 36-foot vessel, the Celebration. All seemed to be going as planned for the first few weeks, but that didn't last long. Things took a devastating turn when Carr began messaging his wife and brother one day at 4:30 a.m., claiming that pirates were kidnapping him. One of the messages stated, "Being kidnapped by film company Deep South Black Cult took over steering." At the time, Carr was more than 1,300 miles from the nearest land, in a region of the Pacific that isn't known for having pirates. And unfortunately, the people he messaged were sleeping and wouldn't see his messages until later. 2 hours after sending the first message, Carr sent his wife and brother texts saying, "Apparently I've been spared," and letting them know that the pirates supposedly left. He also asked his wife to cancel the emergency distress signal he put out. Another hour after that, Carr sent another series of concerning messages, stating that he was shaken and scared. A large-scale Coast Guard search failed to turn up any sign of him or the Celebration, and questions linger surrounding his cryptic messages. Some have theorized that sleep deprivation and/or psychosis played a role in his sudden strange behavior. Carr's family had already noticed the effects of sleep deprivation early on his journey, when he stayed awake for so long that his speech was slurring. He was also hallucinating, and his thoughts were extremely scattered. In the 24 hours leading up to his disappearance, he repeatedly made statements that his family didn't understand and mentioned people they'd never heard of, including someone named Phyllis. Carr's responses to his family's heightened concerns became increasingly sparse. And to make matters worse, his boat had been having mechanical problems in recent weeks. Carr also seemed to be especially worried about the weather. His family grew increasingly worried when they noticed that he was beginning to drift off course. Meanwhile, his messages made less sense and became more ominous. The only thing that was explicitly clear was that Carr thought he was in serious danger. Who wrote about the bizarre tragedy in Outside magazine, described the communications as paranoid and seemingly schizophrenic. At some point following his last message, his location disappeared off the radar. To this day, no trace of Richard Carr or the Celebration has been found, including any debris to suggest that it might have been wrecked. His family has been left to make what little sense of his disappearance they can, based on their interpretations of his disturbing final communications. What do you think happened to Richard Carr? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.